assaulted. It is a generational crime. And so again, we are live on Instagram, Facebook, and Zoom. And I want to preface this conversation and let you all know that there may be triggers, that we are going to be talking about sex. We're going to also be talking about abuse. And I want you all to be prepared. Some of the things that we're going to talk about are really sad, depressing. They should never, ever, ever have happened, but they do. And the only way we can prevent and end violence and abuse is to actually speak it, tell people about it, and create awareness on it. So I'd like to go ahead and bring on my friend, Wendy Gladney. Wendy, how are you today?
Candy, you know what? Life is good. Life is good. I wake up every day grateful and just happy for just another day that the Lord has blessed me with to do the work that He's called me to do. So I have no complaints.
Excellent. Well,
How are
I'm
you
happy
doing?
today too. Huh?
I said, and how are you doing?
I am happy today too. Like you said, I'm thankful and grateful to be alive. I'm thankful and grateful to be in this seat, not just in this seat, but also to be the CEO of Positive Results Center, to talk about childhood sexual assault. And this entire month, we're going to run this series. Tomorrow, we're going to bring on Kelly Dillon and two other people, and we're going to talk about sexual assault in prisons. I believe it's the 16th, maybe it's the 18th. We're going to bring on Dante Morrison, and we're going to talk about sexual assault and boys and girls. And on the 24th, we're going to bring on Dr. Lauren Collins, and also Giovanni Jefferson, and we're going to talk about the intergenerational violence. But I'm really honored to have you here today to talk about childhood sexual assault. And so I would like to just start off by sharing with everyone what the definition of childhood sexual assault is. And it's also known as childhood sexual abuse and child molestation.
Mhm.
And it's a form of child abuse in which an adult or an older adult or adolescent uses a child for sexual stimulation. Forms of child sexual abuse include engaging in sexual activities with the child either by asking or pressuring or by other means. And that includes indecent exposure, child grooming, child sexual exploitation, using child to produce child pornography. Child sexual abuse can occur in a variety of settings, including home, school, and work. Um, Child marriage is also another form of child sexual abuse.
Mhm.
Um, the effects of child sexual abuse can include depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. We say there's no such thing as post. It is continued traumatic stress disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and then further victimization into adulthood. So one last time, let me just tell everyone that we are going to have this conversation and there may be triggers. So Wendy, I'd like to just start off with you telling us who you are and telling us a little bit about your experiences, if that's okay.
Thank you so much, Candy. I would love to. But first, I have to say hello to Trevis, who's on the Zoom, who is somebody near and dear to me who lives in Illinois. And to see her on here is great. And then I have to also say hello to Tammy, who's on the Instagram, because I don't know how to respond and talk to you at the same time. So I just wanted to make sure I saw both of them and they were asking me questions. So I just wanted to make sure I say thank you for joining today. And Travis actually knows my entire story very, very well. So I'm glad that the both of them that I see were able to join us. So again, my name is Coach Wendy. I have actually been in business as an entrepreneur for over 3 decades, close to 32 years. And during that time, also started a nonprofit called Forgiving for Living, which this year turned 25 years. in age in terms of how long we've been serving young women and young girls as relates to overcoming issues of low self-esteem, abuse, and or abandonment. So for me, I mean, I could go on and on about what I do. Primarily, I'm a coach and consultant by trade, and I love it. And I love helping women become their best selves. But today, we're really talking about the root of what I'll call Forgiving for Living's mission. So, Forgiving for Living is a nonprofit that helps young women, mainly between the ages of 12 and 18, but not limited to just those ages, overcome issues of low self esteem, abandonment, abuse, anything that may be holding them back from realizing the life that they were meant to live. And we have various partners, which one of them is PRC. So we're very, very proud of that. And Forgiving for Living was born out of basically my life. It was born out of things that I had to learn to overcome and to deal with. And over time, as I became an adult, it just became amazing to me how many people started asking me questions of how did I survive my childhood. So as a young woman growing up, I'm biracial. My mother's white, my father's African American, and my mother's family disowned her when she ended up marrying a black man and had a black child. I was born in 1961, so I'm 62, going to be 63 this year. But that's at the height of the civil rights movement. So we know, but what's really interesting is, really a lot of things we were dealing with in the 60s, we're still dealing with right now in 2024. But as it relates to my childhood, my grandparents on my biological mother's side, they didn't know how to handle that. They didn't know how to cope with that. And so sadly, my mother didn't either. She was young. She was a teenager when she had me, and she basically didn't know what to do. So she left. So I was about 3 years old when my mother left. I was actually abandoned by her. And there's been stories we've heard where people say somebody was left on a doorstep. Well, I wasn't left on a doorstep, but my mom took me to a friend of hers, and she told her, she said, I'll be back. I'll come get Wendy. And my mom never came back. And so after she didn't return, and I don't remember exactly how long it was, I'll say a day, 24 hours. The lady who was taking care of me, who was a friend of my mom's, she called my dad's mother, my grandmother, who we affectionately call Mother Dear. And she said, Miss Harris, Karen did not come back to get Wendy, and I don't know what to do. And of course, that was way before pagers and cell phones and all the other things that we have going on right now to GPS and tracking people down. And there was none of that. So my grandmother, my biological, I mean, my paternal grandmother, she basically came to my rescue. And I was raised primarily by my father's side of the family, including my dad and my grandmother and aunts. I mean, I'm really a product of the village, as it relates to our family. And so growing up during that time of my life, my dad was very much involved in street life, which is how he met my mother. My father at the time was a musician. He was very charismatic. He was handsome. And let's just keep it real. My mother was a groupie, and my mother got pregnant. And my dad's mom said, son, you laid down with that woman. You're going to now stand up with her and have this child. So that's basically, how it all started. And at the time, my dad he lived a riotous life. And especially after my mother left, and he was still young and running out there in the streets. And my dad was involved with prostitution. He was a pimp. He was a drug dealer. And I actually became a victim of my father's hands of sexual abuse when I was 6 years old. So that's the beginning of the story as relates to my childhood.
Okay. And you said you were 6 years old?
Yes. Yes. When sexual abuse started, it was six. I was 6.
And how long did this last, Wendy?
Well, it lasted for 10 years until I was 16. And, I do want to make sure that the story's right. It's not like this was every single day of my life and every night and so forth. It was at different times of my father's life. And most of the time it was when my father didn't have a woman. If he didn't have a girlfriend, a wife, or somebody in the house, and I was living with my father, I was a victim at his hands. And I used to hate when I would hear the door of my bedroom open, because I knew that meant something was going to happen. And it's interesting when you were talking at first about triggers. And so even for me, sometimes there's sounds or smells that I'll encounter, and it will trigger me for a minute. It doesn't last long. I have gotten professional help over the years, but I loved how you also said, and I'm sure you've said it before, Candy, but for some reason it resonated with me today about there not being post, because no matter whenever you've gone through trauma of any kind, uh, I mean, it's still a memory. It's still something there. You just have to learn how to control it where it doesn't control you or control the actions that you are doing and that you're making. And that's what I had to learn to do.
Right. And I believe, I know that many times people feel that they're the cause of this and it is their fault that these things are happening. And that is really what makes us to continue to have this trauma and us having triggers. Before I go further, I want to say that we have guests on Facebook, on Instagram, and also on Zoom. And we have our team monitoring. So if you have a question that you'd like to ask, please go ahead and write it in the chat and we will get back with you. And I apologize if we have some feedback or an echo. We're doing our best, y'all. We're doing our best. So they're telling me to what? Turn my sound up? Okay. So they're telling me to turn my sound. Okay, my sound is up. Mm-mm.
I hear you.
Okay. Hopefully that will take the echo off. Okay, so Wendy, I know you said that you hated.
The echo came back, just so you know.
Okay.
I can
Maybe
see
can you
people
move
also
that back?
commenting on it.
Can you hear the echo now? Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
But it did go away.
It went away earlier? Okay, so let's try and turn it up. What about now?
Okay, your team is saying that they don't hear it anymore.
Do you hear it?
I don't hear the echo. I just hear you now.
Okay. All right. Well, then hopefully that'll work. Okay. So, Wendy, you said that you hated the door opening, and that would make you know that you were about to experience this. Can you tell us, because so many people ask all the time, did you ever tell anyone that this was happening to you?
Yes. So the thing that's interesting, and also just want to comment, I see people that are saying the echo is on Instagram. So not quite sure about all that. So hopefully they'll still be able to hear us. So as a child, to be honest with you, when it first started, I can't really tell you I understood it all, because I don't know how graphic you want me to be, but let me just say one thing. I was never, this is it's so hard to say, like, on an open forum where it's being taped and everything, but um my father never penetrated me. So a lot of times people think that if you've not been raped in that way or something, that it's not the same sexual assault or abuse, and that's not true. When you've been sexually assaulted, there are various forms. So, it all started with small things, like you were mentioning before, as it relates to whether, it's sit on my lap, sit right here, and then you can feel things growing and you're 6 years old and you don't know what that means, and then there were other things that were happening that I didn't really understand, probably until maybe I was around 9 or 10 years old, that I began to start understanding that what my father was doing and things had progressed and so forth, whether it was if he asked me, like, he wanted to see me get dressed, like, from scratch, and things like that that make you nervous. And especially as a young woman, when you're starting to develop and different things are happening, you're like, Dad, go away, but when you don't grow up in a household with a mother, someone to protect you, you don't know what to do. And then when also you're told, well, if you tell, they'll take you away. And most people always feel I'd rather stay with what I know than to leave to the unknown. And I think from what I understand from working with different young women and ladies, not just in sexual abuse, but physical abuse or verbal abuse, different types of abuse. A lot of times people will stay because they know it's like the enemy versus what you don't know if you leave. So I didn't know what to do because I was told I'd be taken away, if I said anything. And I didn't want to be taken away because I didn't know what that meant. Where would I end up? But as I continued to grow, yes, I did say something, but nobody believed me. Nobody believed me. They just thought I was lying and I was making up stories. And the other thing is my father was very charismatic and everybody liked him. Everybody just thought he was wonderful. And it's interesting. I happened to, I think it was last night, turn on the television and American Gangster was on with Denzel Washington. And you know how some of those characters, we know what they do, but then they're almost like a Pied Piper because at the holidays they give out the free turkeys and well, my dad was the same way. I mean, he was the pimp and the drug dealer and had the gambling shack and all of that. But yet somebody could walk down the street and say, I need to buy my baby some diapers. And my dad would pull out of his pocket and hand them money and say, now get off the street and go buy them diapers. That type of, so, people had real mixed emotions, and including myself, because I can honestly say I never had like where I just hate you. I hate you. I can't really say I never hated my mother, even for leaving me. So I had issues I didn't understand. Why is this happening to me? And as I continued to grow, way after I was grown and married to my first husband, and he even said to me, and I have to always give him credit, you need help. And I'm like, what do you mean you need help? And so that's how I got my first consulting or counseling, I mean. And I remember when the counselor was talking to me through the course of the year, and he always said, there has to always be somebody that steps up and makes the difference and cries out and starts the process of healing and starts the whole breaking the cycle for a family. And I was like, why does it have to be me? What happened to parents, or whatever. So, it was very trying, but in general, regarding your question and my father and everything it was difficult because people loved my dad, including my grandmother. My dad was probably one of her favorites. For the rest that are still living and hearing this, I don't know what they'll say about that, but he was. I mean, he was very charismatic. My father was the only one of her children out of 9 children that never moved away from Riverside, which was where I was born and raised, and stayed there until my grandmother died. Well, until he died, because he passed away before my grandmother. So it was just a tough thing. And it wasn't until I actually wrote my story. I wrote my book, The Preacher's Daughter, and it came out, and I got a lot of backlash from people who were like, why would you put our business in the street? And I was like, no, this is about helping other people. This is about touching lives. And the good thing is I did talk to both my parents before I actually wrote the book and told them that I was led to do that, that God put it on my heart. And they actually that's when it actually like hit everybody that what Wendy is saying is true. And from that also, what happened was other people in the family actually shared some of their own personal stories. And I'll leave it at that because that's their story. But me having the courage to share opened the door for others to come out of the closet to begin their healing.
Wendy,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your truth. And I want to just take a minute and give you some space because I know even though this happened years ago, each time you tell your truth, it comes back. So I want to just give you a moment and say thank you. And I want to thank you on behalf of every person who's been called a liar, who's been told that this did not happen, for your bravery, your honesty, your truth. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, one of the things I will say, and I did see that Travis had a question in the question box, but I can't read it while I'm doing this. But um, I think one of the misnomers, and I'm not quite sure where you want to take this conversation in this direction, but what I was going to say, one of the misnomers is, like I said earlier, is, you know, I've been telling my story for a very long time, for close to 30 years. And I didn't even want to. It was really because other people started learning the story as my father turned his life around, which I would love to be able to share that part, because my dad did turn his life around and changed. But when you don't really understand, and I think one of the questions, I don't know if it was Arnetta or Travis, because I just see things pop up on the screen, but I can't read it, was I didn't really feel or know that I was being victimized. I don't like saying I'm a victim, but victimized. You know, probably, like I said, till I was around 9 or 10, because you don't understand. You know, one of the things the counselor said to me was, all of our understanding of emotions and feelings and appropriate behavior, etc., is comes from your parents or whoever raises you, you know, your guardians, your parents. So when that's jacked up from the beginning, you know, it's kind of like, what do you know to be correct behavior, you know, if you don't know that? And when I got a chance to spend time with my grandmother, which was off and on until I was older, because I kept getting snatched back by my dad, and that's a whole nother story. But my grandmother was my grandmother was a very strong Black woman from the South, first generation born free. My grandmother was born at the beginning of the 1900s. Her father was born in 1861. So, you know, it's like she just wanted to keep a family together. Her husband, my grandfather, passed away in the late 1950s, before I was ever born. So, I mean, she was carrying on her back her entire family, you know, all her children, grandchildren, and she just tried to keep us together, but she did not know how to deal with handling sexual abuse within her own family.
I think most people don't know how to deal with sexual abuse. Um, one of the things that I wanted to say, um, is that very often people want to know why people don't leave, whether it is domestic violence or sexual abuse. And you said it very clearly, is that you loved your father
I did.
and
Still
you
do.
didn't want to go someplace else. And even though eventually you knew that this didn't feel right, but you also had that strong bond. And people need to understand that people want the violence to end. They don't want the love to end. They want the abuse to end. And we stay thinking that it's going to stop. And so I want people to know that, and be very clear about it. And also, it is really important that people understand that many abusers, whether they are sexual abusers, domestic violence abusers, thieves, they have the most charismatic personality. People love them, you know, and people are like, no, that cannot possibly be that person's truth. So I'm glad you brought that up, because we were going to talk about that, but you did a great job speaking about it. But I want to take just a minute longer to talk about how you felt when you told someone and they called you a liar. Because I know that's something that so many people struggle with, that I'm telling someone that I love and I'm telling someone that I trust, and you're thinking that they love you and trust you. How did that feel when they told you they didn't believe you?
couple of things. So a couple of people, and this is just true transparency, that I shared that with, that said that I was lying, um, are no longer with us. They've gone on to glory. But I didn't really respect them that much, so for them to say that to me or whatever, it it hurt, but not the way when I didn't understand how come my grandmother couldn't have done more. Because my grandmother is my heart. I will forever be grateful to the Lord for just, if I did not have my grandmother, I don't know where I would be today, to be honest. I mean, even though she was not able to stop the violence at that time because she didn't know how, she was still where I could run to, and I was safe with her, and I knew that she loved me, but she just didn't know how to deal with it, and I didn't understand it as a child, but as I've gotten older and so forth and dealt with different things in my own life, it became more understandable for me to understand that. Um, but what happened, so let me fast forward and to tell part of what happened, of how it all came to a head, and it is in my book, and it's out there and everything. But so one day I was living with my father. I was 16 years old. I was in my shower, taking a shower, and my father walked in on me, and one of the things my father really liked to do was to try to look at me naked, and he would masturbate. So when that was when he walked into the bathroom, and I was in the shower, and he was throwing the curtain open to look at me, for some reason, something made me scream in a way I had never screamed before. And I said, get out, daddy, get out, leave me alone. And I just was yelling. Well, I had an uncle who's still alive today, my dad's brother, who happened to come to the front door at that time, and he heard me screaming. And we had a front door where, you have side panels on a door that has glass, and he broke the glass and put his hand in and came in, and he saw what was going on. Because he came straight to where he heard me screaming. And when he saw my father, he snatched the curtain down, threw it over me. And basically he took my father out of the bathroom, and and he said, Johnny, you have a problem. And I think that's when it really hit the family, because then my uncle still told. And and that was the last time that I had an encounter with my father in that way. It was sad, though, that it took a family member to have to see it before the whole family believed it. I'm sorry, I just did not know I was going to cry.
Wendy, you're fine. You are amazing. And I thank you. This is really a difficult conversation, no matter when you have it.
Yes. So that was the beginning of the family really understanding that what I had been saying for 10 years. And it would take, I actually have but I think it's out in my folder. It would take many more years before my father actually asked me for forgiveness. And, but what happened even before that was my dad had a heart attack when I was in high school. And my grandmother said that I needed to go to the hospital to say goodbye to him because they thought he was going to die. And he was 39 years old. And I went to the hospital and I just looked at my father and I just told him that I forgave him for everything he had ever done to me. And I mean, I had other conversations because he was quiet. And I just told him I wanted him to get his life right with the Lord before he passed. And so I saw a tear roll down his face. And during that time, nothing was really said back to me at that time. And I was in high school. And then when I went off to college is when my father really started getting his life back on track with the Lord, because just like I was raised by my grandmother who taught me about the Lord, she did the same, of course, with her children. And it would not be until I was married to my first husband, who's the father of my children, that we actually had, as they would say, a come to Jesus conversation where I asked him, Daddy, how could you have done these things to me my entire childhood, really? And he said, when I was in that world, he said, all women belong to me. He said, I looked at all women as basically my property. And so you were part of my property.
Wow. So Wendy, everyone is sending you their love and thanking you for your transparency and for your strength. Just to let you know that we're here with you. We're here with everyone who's experienced some form of abuse. I just have a question about this.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that you want parents, whether they, what do you want someone to know? If someone were to come and tell them, whether they are a parent, a friend, or anyone, if someone comes to tell you that something is happening, what do you want them to know? What would you suggest that they say or do?
Well, first of all, listen. I mean, really listen. Now, in doing the work that we do, which is why I have a commitment and a dedication to forgiving for living, we also have a responsibility that if we know a child is being abused, that it gets reported. Now, the hard part or the sad part is sometimes young ladies won't tell on themselves. They'll say, I have a friend, but it's them. And so, you have to kind of know how to guide them on what are, phone numbers they can call, how could they get help, share it with your friend. But oftentimes it's them. But I would, like I said earlier, when it's a child or young person, they don't know what to do because it could be worse, or they feel it could be worse if they end up, in child protective services, and so it's a very difficult situation. But the first thing I would say is listen, like listen to what they're saying to you. And it could be something like, my uncle, cousin, friend, whatever, pulls his pants down every time I come over or I'm down, listen to what they're saying, because also you want to begin to try to stop things as much as you can before they escalate. Because I think perpetrators, they do things because they can get away with it. They've been
Yes.
getting away with it, so they keep getting away with it. But it's not until somebody, you know, catches them. Like for me, he got caught, in the act. And so there's no denying it. I mean, his pants were down. He's caught in the act, you know? And so there's no more doubting the child or the young person. So, but if people would have listened to me earlier, it may not have escalated to the place where it got to. But and still, I could have maybe been with family, versus being gone into a child protective services. So listen, and if they're telling you something, and let's just say if somebody was lying, why are they lying? Then find out what else is going on in their life. There might be something else that they're begging for attention as a child that they don't know how to explain that either.
Yeah.
So, really listen. I just want to say that I saw somebody asked, where did I, or when did I, or how did I know that forgiving my father would be a beginning step for healing for myself? And I would say that I can't really say I just knew that, but I know that I have a gift of forgiveness. I know that. I mean, I didn't understand it a long time ago, but um, I know it's true just from life and what's happened and so forth. Because we haven't even gotten into the whole part of my mother,
Right.
that whole thing about abandonment and then coming back into my life and then having to be her caregiver and all of that. So, forgiveness has played a big role. But one of the things I will say about that, in case we run out of time, is my grandmother planted a seed in me as a child, raising me in the church and with the Lord, that the word of God said to honor your mother and father. And then she said, and it doesn't say that, it doesn't mean if they act right. So
Right.
honoring your parents is part of what I had in my brain. Now, that doesn't mean they're justified in whatever they do. It doesn't mean it's right. But as a child, I remember being taught to honor your parents. So I think for me, that was part of a reason also why I could never hate them. I could be
Right.
hurt, I could be disappointed, all kinds of things, but I really can't say I hate anybody, to be honest. But
Right.
I never hated them. But I know I strayed now from your question, but it's the
No.
bottom line was, listen, really listen to them and
Yeah.
and do whatever you can as an adult to help mitigate something before it gets too big, and then get the proper, you know, official help when you have to. But if you can stop something before it escalates and keep a family together or pull that child out. But sometimes it's not just children either. I mean, grown women are dealing with certain things too. And a lot of that comes from a lack of self-esteem, and going through things. I mean, I've had my own set of issues. You know what? Somebody told me a long time ago, a lot of people who teach certain things teach because either like they can't do it any other way. So for example, the best way I know how to explain it is people who teach acting end up teaching acting because they can't get an acting job, but
Right.
they know acting. Well, oftentimes, we teach things that we either wish somebody else would have taught us, or things that we come through that we want to make sure somebody else doesn't have to experience. And so
Yes.
that's been my whole thing about forgiveness and healing, and why I try to be as transparent as I can, with my life, because first I want others to know they're not alone if they've if they've gone through something like that, and that it is possible to come through it and not just survive, but thrive. And then helping others to come through it. It's a shame that we have to even experience anything like this, but it's all over the world. It's
It
all over
is.
the world. It's not just right here with us. It's all over the world. Young women and young boys are being
I'm so,
all the time.
yeah, and I'm so glad you said that it does. It happens to people from the time they are born, because some newborns are experiencing this abuse until the time they die, and sometimes after they die. I want to just take a moment and go back a second. And for people that are told, not only do I want you to listen, but I want you to fix your face. Fix your face, because very often someone will tell you something and you have that look like, what? Huh? You turn your face up, and what that tells the child or someone else is that you don't believe me, you don't want to hear it, and you wish that I would go away. And so very often abuse will happen, and it will continue to happen, because not only did you call them a liar, but that face tells you that, I don't believe anything you're saying. It's turning them off. So we have to do better. We have to really do better by our children, because as you said, Wendy, most children don't lie, but if they are lying, if they're telling the story, it's because there's something else going on.
They don't know how to communicate what else is hurting or whatever is bothering them.
Right.
And then a couple of things I want to comment on what you just said, Candy, and that is what's happening is when people do that, like you said about the whole face, because body language sometimes can be louder than verbal language.
Yes.
It
Yes, it
really
can.
can. And if you already don't feel safe, and then now you're going to a place where you supposedly are safe, but the body language is not telling you that, then what happens is it makes you turn inward and it makes you not know, where can I be safe? And so I would say that. But the other thing too is when somebody comes to you, whether it's a child, an adult, or whatever, is coming to you in confidence, you have to learn how to keep that confidence. And I don't mean not telling, professionals for help, but I'm talking about, running around and gossiping, basically, even if it's just to the family, but gossiping. And then what happens is, and then for me, part of the reason why I really like to work on helping people with their self-confidence is because I went through it. I really did. And a lot of people would look at me and say, "But you seem like you have it all together." I was like, "I'm so broken inside. What are you talking about?" It's like they would not even understand. And some of it was because people that you go to for help end up being the ones that are running around talking about you. Like, I thought you were a safe space. I thought I was supposed to be able to be myself and be honest with you to get help. And then so now that becomes like building blocks on your trauma because now there's more things that you have to deal with. And until you get the right kind of help, it's just not easy to break that cycle.
That is so real because I remember hearing people say, oh, so and so is fast. So and so is always in some man's face. How is it that we want to blame the abuser? I mean, blame the victim, the person who's being victimized. We don't protect children. We don't protect people that are being abused, that we want to keep this little family secret. Let's just keep it in house. We're going to say that we're going to watch grandpa, daddy, auntie, because let's be real, women are abusive too. Women have sexually abused girls and boys.
Mhm.
And instead of us wrapping our arms around the person who is being abused, normally a child or a young adult, we want to victimize them. We want to say that she's fast, she or he wanted my partner, that if they didn't do this or they didn't do that, or even though, what were you wearing? Why were you in that person's room or space or face? Let's stop. Let's stop blaming
Mhm.
and let's start protecting and let's start supporting.
Yeah.
So, Wendy, you've got a couple of questions that were posed in Zoom.
Oh,
This first one asks, when did you comprehend? Nope, nope, nope. That's not the one that I wanted to ask because
I
I
think
think,
that was from Travis, and I
right,
I answered that one.
right. And Arnetta asked the question.
Okay.
Let's see. Did you learn that your dad was victimizing others in the family?
That's a good question. So, no, I never knew that. Um, but what is interesting is I do have two sisters. We have different moms, but same father. And they did not live, and a lot of people know who my sisters are. They did not live with our dad during that time. They lived with their mom because their mom and our dad got a divorce when uh I was like 9 and they were like 3 and 4, So they weren't around. And now what I will say is I do know that there were young women who uh either lived with us at a time or were our babysitters that I know for a fact that my dad abused. Now family members, I don't know anyone else.
And that's important because what community needs to know is that not every case, but oftentimes anyone who is being abused, if they're being abused by one person, that person is more than likely abusing other people.
Yeah. And I think so. I mean, like I said, I do know for a fact because I witnessed it with my own eyes. So I know. Um, and I was sad, just
Right,
seeing what was going on. And it's hard because they were young. The babysitters were young.
right.
I mean,
It,
teenagers.
it happens so much. People think that I'm the only one, or that this won't happen, or it happened before, but it won't happen again. I know this one person, her father assaulted her and found out later on that he had sexually assaulted all of his children, boys and girls.
Hmm.
And no one believed them. And turns out that the mother had some substance issues. And that also contributed to it because, as you said, your mother wasn't there and your mother is normally your protector. And
Hmm.
so we have to watch out for our family members, for our girls and boys.
Hmm.
And it's important that we talk about it from the standpoint with boys, because very often, if you want to know why a man today is angry and upset, we have to go back and look at the little boy and what happened to him. And the same for women and girls. If she's experiencing some trauma, some anger, some substance issues, low self-esteem,
Hmm.
very often they've dealt with some form of violence, and it could be sexual assault, domestic violence, or any of those items.
I would also say that there's the saying that says hurt people.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened to my father, as a young man, as a boy, I don't know. So I don't know if he also had any type of that violence in his life. I don't know. Um, so it's difficult, even though I know hurt people hurt people. But I do have a couple of things I do want to make sure I say that are very important regarding my story.
Okay.
But I don't want to change up the
I was,
your question.
no, we can go wherever you want,
Okay.
because what I wanted to move into after this is for you to talk about healing as well as forgiving for living.
Mhm. Well, and I'm moving into the healing part. So,
Okay.
a couple of things happened, and for those that are believers that say that they love the Lord, that they're Christians, and that they pray for people, and then when God actually answers a prayer, sometimes we don't believe it. We don't believe it. And what I mean by that is I I was raised by my grandmother to pray for both my parents. And I always prayed for both my parents. And I used to always, just pray that the Lord would heal my father from the world, that he was a part of, and also to heal my mother, because I didn't know much about my mother. So it was very difficult for me to have specifics about her. But anyway, my father actually ended up changing his life. I mean, after he had the heart attack, he was in the hospital. And my father actually started going back to church, and he repented, and he actually eventually became a pastor of a church. And he was going out into the streets and basically approaching the same guys he used to run with, that he would gamble with and do drugs with and everything, and began to witness to them. And it took time, because I'll be honest, when I first found out my father was back in church and that my dad was looking at ministry, um, I remember contacting him and saying, "Look, Dad, we just wanted you to save your soul, but don't go pimp the church. Don't start doing all that." And but in time, he proved himself that he really was trying. And it was during that season of his life that we also had our come to Jesus conversation I mentioned to you earlier. And when I asked him, and then that's when he asked me for forgiveness. And he eventually wrote me a letter and um and thanked me for forgiving him first. And so during my adult years, so let me back up a little bit. So when I was 18, I also very much wanted to know who my mother was. And because I always was raised and was told I looked like my mother and all that. And I didn't even have a photograph at that time of my mom. So I didn't even know really what she looked like. And I was able to meet my mom. And when I met her, I was 18. I was a freshman at UCLA, found out my mother only lived less than an hour, like 45 minutes from where I grew up my whole life. And long story short, at that particular time, I was not allowed to be back in her life. And she was remarried to a white man who didn't even know I existed. And so it would be another 12 years. It would be when I turned 30 that I got a phone call. I mean, I would hear from her periodically during that time, and I would write her letters and send her Christmas cards and stuff like that. But when I was 30 years old, I got a phone call from her one day, and she said, "Wendy, Eric has died, and I'm homeless, and I have nowhere to go. And will you help me?" And I was married to my first husband at the time, and I turned to him and I was talking to him, and he said, "Well, you always said you wanted to know your mother. I guess this is how it's coming." And so I went and picked up my mom. My mom came and lived with us, and we took care of my mother for 11 years, until she died. And I will say that a couple of major things happened during that time. My mother and I never became close. It was never the relationship that I hoped for. But two things. One, now let me just, this is now the power of God. And that's why I had to make sure I shared this point. Remember, I told you my dad was now a minister and a pastor of a church? Well, we were going to his church to support his ministry. My mother actually accepted Christ through my dad, and my dad actually baptized my mother. Yeah, take that in for a minute. The se-
What? I just got a chill.
yeah. The second thing that happened was not only did my mother accept the Lord and so forth, but the next thing was the first time that I decided to tell my story. I actually went to my father and I said, "Dad, I think it's time for me to tell my story and share it with the world." And that was before I wrote the book. And I said, "But I'd like to do it first in front of your congregation before I go public." And, he was kind of like, "What?" And because everybody didn't know my stories, some did, but some didn't. And so I said, "Well, think about it, pray about it." And my mom was living with me at the time. And I told her, and she said she didn't have a comment really. She said, "Whatever you want to do." And so one Sunday at my father's church, when at the very end of his sermon, my dad made an announcement and just said, "I really would appreciate it if everybody would stay for a minute. My daughter has something that she wants to say." And he said, "Wendy, please come forward." And then my dad went and sat on the front of his pew at the church. My mom came and sat next to him. My dad was remarried at the time, and his current wife, her name is Bridget, she came and sat with my dad. And my family, ex-husband, children, all came and sat right behind them. And I shared my story from the beginning to the end, but how God, through God's ability to help us all have forgiveness, this family has come back together, and I have forgiven both of my parents, and how we were able to come full circle, but only through the power of forgiveness. And some people thought I was selfish in wanting to share that before I did, because they thought it was going to ruin my dad's church with him starting a new life and everything. And this is why when you really speak from your heart and you're doing what God has called you to do, you don't know what he's going to do and how he's going to do it, because my dad's church actually grew after that. And for people to see how my dad and I and my mom were able to embrace each other, um, was a healing for a lot of family members. And it's interesting. I don't know how to look on my Instagram while I'm talking to you, but I see my nephew is on. Jace is on Instagram. And that's my wonderful nephew. And so the point is, there's been a lot of healing, even in our family, and hopefully in other, other people's families, just from, just from being transparent, and being willing to be the person that sometimes people don't like for a minute.
I keep needing to breathe. Thank you. I want to go back in and read a comment to you from Brianna. She says, your vulnerability is powerful and inspiring. And also you were shedding tears for so many people. Your
Thank
truth is so important. People do not normally hear this detail. They'll get a glimpse of an article and they don't know what to do with it. But what I love was that you were able to heal. And we go through so many traumas, but once you learn how to share your truth, and it helps to heal. And it heals not only you, but it can heal the entire family. And that's what you did. You healed the entire family. You also broke a generational curse. I don't know if it had happened to your father or if it happened to your grandmother. And very often we know that it did happen to many women, especially a woman who her husband is not there and she's trying to take care of so many children.
Yeah, it's like we just don't know what other people have, the road that they've had to travel. But
We
and
don't.
then let me say this too, as a quick point. One of the things I've also learned about forgiveness in my own life is forgiving doesn't mean forgetting either.
Right.
And and what I learned is that for me, as when my children were young, and after my father and I got to a place of healing and forgiveness, and were able to begin a new relationship, because we did have a good relationship by the time he passed. Um, I still never let my daughter be with him alone. So he was able to, my grandchildren visited their grandfather and spent time, but it was never alone. And if I wasn't there, or his wife, my dad's wife, they didn't stay with him. I mean, I'm not even, I'm talking about not even like during the day, forget staying the night. I'm just saying at all, because for me, that was part of, as a parent and as a mother, trying to help break a cycle in terms of a family still coming together, but not allowing an opportunity, because you never know. And I wasn't going to let that happen to my children.
Thank you. I tell people so often, they'll say, I, I know a young lady who her grandfather sexually abused his children and the grandchildren. And they decided to keep him at home
Mhm.
and to love him and support him and forgive him.
Yes.
But they also forgot and they let the grandchildren and the great grandchildren around. And of course, he sexually assaulted them. And I tell people, you have to remember that a pedophile, an abuser, they are looking for opportunities. And while you're watching them, they're watching you. They know your schedule better than anything.
Yeah.
So please don't allow a person to have an opportunity to hurt you or hurt your family.
Mhm.
You don't know, I'm going to say this, you don't know who is doing what. You hope and pray that you have great people in your family, but you just don't know. Make sure that you are watching your children and protecting your children. Don't stifle them, but also don't let your children spend the night somewhere. Don't just say, oh, your children can go any place with anybody, because very often abusers and pedophiles are looking for that opportunity. They show up very friendly, they show up really nice. Look, I can watch your kids while you run to the store. And this is for especially for single parents, because they're overwhelmed with one child, much less two, three, or four. And so they look for opportunities for someone to help them. But that's also where that pedophile and the abuser shows up. But they're looking for the opportunity to get in with your child. Also, let me say this. Tell your children from an early age that they should never, ever, ever allow someone to tell them a secret. There's no such thing as a secret in our house.
Mhm.
Make sure that they know that they can come to you. I tell my daughter, I tell everyone else, when your child talks to you, I don't care what you're doing. You're cooking, you're on the phone, stop. Give your child some eye to eye attention and let them know that they are the most important person right then. There is nothing more important than them, so that they will feel comfortable coming to you.
So
So Wendy, oh, go
can I say
ahead.
a couple more things too? And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for all the love to everybody that's on the show, because I can see some of the comments and some, but also I'm very touched because I have several family members that are on this. My sister Sarah's on here, my niece slash cousin Christiana's on here, my nephew. So when you have family that stays with you and stands with you and knows what you've been through. Thank you. Because a lot of people try to run and block stuff versus coming beside you and letting you know you're not alone forever. So thank
And
you.
Wendy, I know your family. They love you. Your
I know, but when you're
community
talking
loves you.
about this subject, it's not easy.
Yes, this is true.
It's not
But
easy.
I know that your family loves you.
I know.
And we, your community, know your truth, and we love you.
Mhm.
Please love your family and your friends who tell you their truth. And please don't shame them. Please don't blame them. Please don't accuse them, because it is never their fault. And thank all of Wendy's family and friends that are here today to support her. Because I know that's what you're here for. You're here to support her. So Arnetta has one more question.
Okay.
The question is, was that your mom's first time hearing it? I'm assuming she meant while at church.
Well, she, see, I was never really close to her. My daughter actually ended up being much closer to her than I ever really was, and it was hard because I tried. Um, but that side of the family, they're German, they're tough, they're stoic, and it's just a whole different thing. And I would share things with her, but I, for her to truly understand everything that happened, the way it happened, and to the depth, I think it wasn't until really that day. I mean, she knew bits and pieces, but I think that part of her survival was denial, for even her part in it, of leaving, when I was a little girl. So I think that, that was part of her survival. And I don't even judge her anymore, or anything like that, because a lot of us don't know what we would do if we were in somebody's same shoes and so forth. But we never were close.
Travis asked a question.
Mhm.
When you are the person that has been through the series of assaults and have children, do you have the conversation about what you have been through, or a different kind of conversation?
Well, I've been transparent for so long. My kids grew up with it. So for me, my children, they knew from a very young age. And because I also wrote the book at a young age, I had, when they were young, I had to talk to them because I didn't want other people to know things my children didn't know as relates to their mother, and also then how to protect them. So for me personally, my children and my family for that matter, they've known, what happened to me, and has some of them, of course, like I said, more than others, have come beside me and have been my cheerleaders in terms of, we got you, Wendy, we're here with you, and we're gonna help you. And then there's others that don't want to talk to you because you don't spill the tea about the family in the street, so to speak. Now, if that was the reason I did it, I understand. But for me, it was part of my healing. And then it was also about healing other people when people started hearing about my story before I even went public with it, but they heard things and then they would ask me, could you talk to my daughter? Could you talk to my wife? Could you talk to my, and I'm kind of like, talk to them about what? How you survived, how you did it. And that was actually, it's funny, this bookmark that I keep, it's so old. My sister Sarah made it for me years ago. But this is the first bookmark that I had about healing without hate. And it's the 10 steps that I use. And I still use them to this day when people ask me, how did you get through it? Or how do you do it? Or what would you recommend? And I spent time really thinking, how did I make it? How did I get through it? And so forth. So
Would you share those 10 steps with us?
okay, so basically it's 10 quick steps. The first one is prayer. Pray for them. Pray for those who've hurt you. Because what I learned is if you're praying for people that hurt you, it's very difficult to hate them. You'll either your heart will either soften to where you're trying to figure out answers, or you'll stop praying for them. Number two, seek counsel. Get the right kind of help you need. Don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. A lot of times, especially in our community, people would say, I'm not going to no therapist. I'm not doing this. They'll say, that means something's wrong with me. Well, yeah, there is. We got to get right. Let's get fixed. So don't be ashamed to get counseling. Number three, confront a situation. Sometimes in confronting, it may mean you look in a mirror because, we're talking about sexual abuse against a child, so it's not your fault with that. But when we're talking about different things with healing, sometimes you have to look in the mirror. What part did you play in something as it relates to helping a situation get better? And then sometimes you look through a window where you're looking at the other person that caused it. And in our case, where we're talking about the sexual abuse, it was a window, not a mirror. As a 6-year-old child, it's not a mirror. The next one, step four, is release. Sometimes there's certain things in life you have to learn to just let go, that you don't have control over as it relates to why people act a certain way or do. You have to protect yourself, but you cannot necessarily change other people. And you have to learn to release and let it go. Number five is the cornerstone called forgive. And I talk about that, the pardon versus parole. Oftentimes we parole people in forgiveness versus pardoning them. And I don't mean where it's as if they never hurt you, but it is as if it can control you. Because when you parole people, that means there's conditions. That means every time you hear that person's name, it's going to be a trigger, or you're going to say, whatever. And oftentimes, how many times have we heard someone say, I forgive them, but if they do this again, I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. Well, that's parole. That's conditions versus releasing it and letting go. Number six is attitude. No matter what you've been through, have an attitude of gratitude, because the fact that you're still here means that we have time for healing. We have time in order to get to the other side. And number seven is joy. Find joy in your life. Find happiness and what really brings you true joy. Number eight, write down your goals. Figure out, how are you going to go to your next step? What do you got to do? How do I get, beyond all of this? Write the goals down. Number nine is give. Share with others whatever you have to share, whether it's money, resources, time, whatever, but share. Because when you turn your eyes off yourself and turn them onto someone else, it also, helps you heal, but it also shows you that, it may not be as bad as what you're thinking in your heart as it relates to terms of giving up. Because some people who've been through some of the things I've been through, they commit suicide, they give up. And that cannot be the answer. And then number 10 is live. live your life to the fullest every single day. I'm done.
Thank you, Wendy. That's beautiful. You wrote all of those, right?
I did.
Just want to be clear about that. Let everyone know those 10 steps came from Wendy herself.
I see
Um,
Trevis says that she still has the bookmark because she has the bookmark.
yes.
Hmm.
And Arnetta says, Wendy, you have such a warm and beautiful spirit. So many would have come out bitter after an experience like yours, but God has truly filled you up and softened the hard places. Love you much.
I just want to say thank you, Arnetta. I mean, Arnetta, oh, the computer did that.
I
But
know that's cool.
I don't. But Arnetta also has been so helpful with helping me with my family history. So, back at you. And I also saw Lorna. I don't know if she's still on, but I saw a comment from Lorna. Thank you, Lorna. I appreciate your love. These are our sister friends in the community.
Yes. And I have to just tell everyone, I've known Wendy since maybe 2008 when I first came to the community. And when I tell you, this woman is generous. She is generous with her time. She is generous with her thoughts. She is generous with her prayers. She is generous with her finances. She is generous in a way that is unusual for people. And you cannot help but love Wendy. Wendy, we cannot help but love you because of just who you are. And it was years before I even knew Wendy's truth. Some people carry the pain and the trauma all over their face, all over their body. And you're right, Wendy, some people will commit suicide or they will become addicted to something, whether it is food, sex, drugs, alcohol, sleeping. It could be any thing, but you didn't carry that. And I'm gonna guess that is because of your spirit and your ability to pray,
Mhm.
and so I want people to know that if you ever have experienced sexual assault, it is not your fault. It
Mhm.
is not your fault. You did not do anything to warrant it. It is not your fault. And I also have to say this is that very often people think it's their fault or that they wanted it because their body reacted.
Mm.
We are human beings and we're sexual human beings. And you could close your eyes and someone could touch your body in a certain space, in a certain place, and for everyone it's a different place, and your body will react. And it's the same thing with sexual trauma, with sexual violence, that sometimes your body may react to that.
Mhm.
But that does not mean that you wanted this to happen.
Mhm.
I want people to know that there's help. Wendy has started her own company, Forgiving for Living, but I want to take a moment and tell people that if something is happening to you, you could reach out to the National Sexual Assault Hotline, which is 1-800-656-4673. That's 1-800-656-4673. And there's some amazing organizations out in the community that's doing work. Wendy's is one, Forgiving for Living, Positive Results is another. And we address trauma and we do art therapy, physical therapy, or excuse me, writing, drawing, art therapy, music therapy. One of our new partners is on the line, and that's let me bring it up big so I could see it. Brianna's organization is Voices Beyond Assault. There's great organizations in the community. Please find someone that could support you and help you. And so, Wendy, as we roll down to our last few minutes, tell everybody a little bit about Forgiving for Living and what you do and how people can reach you if if they need help, if they want to support the work that you do.
Thank you, Candy. So, as Candy's mentioned, we do have Forgiving for Living, and that's at forgivingforliving.org. And it's also very much a family affair. My sister's actually chairman of the board, and my daughter is secretary. And then we have the rest non-family members involved with the board and so forth. But we care about making a difference and an impact in lives, and in especially young people, young women. But also as relates to grown women, I'm still here too. It's not formal like Forgiving for Living, but we have Season of Greatness. I'm also a coach. So a lot of times I work with those subject matters with women in different ways, as long as I know they don't need therapy. If it's therapy, I'm going to send you to a therapist. But sometimes you just need to talk it through or have a conversation with a coach and help you as it relates to the next steps in your life. And to find me, it's just easy. WendyGladney.com is my website, and then forgivingforliving.org. And I'm all over social media under Wendy Gladney. And if you need to, you can call me. 951-313-4732. So, and I know
Wendy, no,
it's
go ahead.
easy to find, so it's not hard.
And Wendy is an excellent coach. Wendy coached me. I was going to say, when I first met Wendy, I had no clue what I was doing. And I asked people, like, I need someone. And they all directed me to Wendy. And the generosity and love that she showed me day one, to this little Black girl from South Central Los Angeles that did not know anything, is still the same love that she shows me today. So thank you, Wendy. Wendy, I've got a comment from Jasmine. She said, these are good. Those were your 10 points. Thank you for sharing. She didn't get a chance to write them all down, but she wanted to know again, what was your bookmark called again? And also, is there a way that people can purchase them?
Well, it's funny because one of your trusty partners that works with me too already challenged me on that.
Right?
I do, actually, this is the only one I have.
So we need to make some more, Wendy,
Okay,
and sell them,
that's what
Wendy.
Ashley just said. So, yes, I'll have to work on making more.
Okay. Brianna says, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Travis says, I'm so grateful for Wendy. I'm still experiencing why God connected us 24 years ago. My forgiving, healing process was a result of being a part of her life. And I'm most thankful that she has trusted me with her children. That is
I
beautiful.
have to say, Travis lived with us for a few years, and I'm not going to tell her whole story, but she lived with us when I was a single mom, and she was very much there for me and my kids. It started out with me helping her, and she ended up helping me, which is oftentimes what happens in life. And
That
and
happens.
then we helped each other. So, and we're still in each other's lives to this day, even after she's grown, married, and moved to another state. It's okay, Travis. I forgive you for leaving. No, I'm just kidding. She's always kept in touch.
And Brianna says, this was such a great program. Thank you, wonderful and empowering women. Well, let me tell you something. Our community, we are brilliant, we are beautiful, we are amazing, we are strong because we support one another. Don't let the smoothness fool you. Lies are abound that tell you that we don't support one another, especially Black women.
Yeah.
We do. We
Yes.
support one another. We uplift and encourage and support and undergird each other. So we are here not only for each other. I'm not only just here for Wendy. Wendy is here for me. My team is here for Wendy. As you heard, my team is telling Wendy, look, Wendy, here's another source of income, because we all want it. And Wendy, I've known you all these years and I didn't know that you had a bookmark. I need to buy like 100 myself so that I can make sure that we get them out to the community. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But I guess the last thing that I just want to say, let me just check my notes for anybody who's like, why does she keep looking down? I'm looking on my cell phone where I have all my notes. Why is forgiving important, and how do you forgive? We already heard your 10 steps, but
Well,
why is it important?
I have a mantra that is at the bottom of a lot of things that I write, especially my weekly columns in the LA Sentinel and the Inland Valley News. And I end them with healing without hate. It's a choice, it's a lifestyle. Pass it on. So I believe it's something that you make your mind up. every single day. It's not something that you get to and it's over. It's something that you practice every day. I decide I'm going to forgive. I decide I'm going to heal. And it starts with ourself. A lot of times forgiveness is really more for you than the other person, because sometimes other people have moved on with their lives, don't even know how much they hurt you, don't even care, and you're still being held back from whatever it was. And so forgiveness really starts with, something that's good for you. And it's a gift you give to someone else, but it starts with you. And then the whole healing process, you have to be kind. And that's why self-care is so important. That's why it's also important who you surround yourself with. It's also important who you trust. There's just so many things involved in order for your own well-being. You have to think about your own, because just like they say in the airplane, if you don't have on your mask first, how are you going to help someone else? Excuse me. So I know that it's important for me to be able to take care of myself, because I have people depending on me. I have children, I have grandchildren now, and then I have my beloved community, my family, friends, etc. That I know that if I want to be my best for, I got to also take care of me. And I have to say, I also have, I have fabulous people in my life. I have a fabulous sister, my sister Sarah. And that's my road dog. That's my girl. And we've been through a lot together in life, a lot. And but we constantly are uplifting each other. And you need that. You got to have your sister friends. And also what's really important is when you've come through something like sexual assault or any kind of abuse in a family, and then you have family that stands with you as well, that means a lot, because even whether they were there or not directly there, but know from the beginning, they know from the beginning, what has gone down.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, Wendy, we are almost at our time. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank
I
you.
thank you so much for your honesty, for your transparency, for for sharing your truth, for helping us to learn a little bit more, to be a little bit more understanding, to hear those 10 ways to heal. Thank you for just being who you are at all times. And I'm not, they want to know, how can they get her book? Oh, everybody wants to know, how can we get your book, Wendy?
I just put in the in the chat, but basically you can go to wendygladney.com. Go
So
to
I'm going to
Wendy
repeat
Gladney
this.
for my books. You just go to wendygladney.com.
Okay, so everybody, and that's Wendy, Wendy, Gladney, Gladney, wendygladney.com.
Mm.
Her book is amazing. She is amazing. Wendy is also available not only to be your coach, but also to come and speak. She does speaking engagements. There is a fee for that. But you will not be disappointed because she is an excellent speaker. She shows up with her full heart and she will share everything with you. She is all about the healing process. So let me just say a couple of more things. We had a couple of comments here. Were there any other comments, Crystal, on? Okay, so yes. Jasmine says, please put together those 10 the 10 comments. And this was amazing. Thank you for your vulnerability. I already said that, I believe, and your powerful testimony. Brianna Redmond is one of my new friends on Instagram. She has an amazing truth herself. Hopefully she'll come back and join us and we'll talk about her truth. But her organization is Voices Beyond Abuse. And she states, we are hosting our second annual benefit gala on April the 29th to end Sexual Assault Awareness Month, to live with live performances, art, and food, but mainly to raise funds for Voices Against Abuse mission and to stand in solidarity with survivors. Let me just say this to everyone who's watching. Your donations are critical to the success of Positive Results, to Forgiving for Living, to Voices Beyond Abuse, and to every nonprofit organization. And I know you may say, I don't have a lot of money. $1 is a beautiful benefit that we would love. $5, $10. We want those $500, those $5,000, $500,000, and $5 million. If you got it, give it to us. It's a tax write-off for you, okay? We need it. We need it to do this work and to support people who are survivors, because trust me, there are so many people who've experienced violence and abuse, and they need people such as ourselves. So I'm going to end with thanking you all for your time and consideration. We really appreciate you. Please learn more about Positive Results Center by going to our website, which is www.prc123.org. Scroll all the way down to the bottom and sign up for our newsletter so you can learn about all of the workshops we're doing, also about our mental health ambassador program that's coming up. This is a paid 12-week program where we work with transitional age youth, and we train them on the 5 common causes of that affect our mental health and how we show up and how other people receive from us. Also our community outreach, but more important, our healing work, so that we can support survivors, be that men or women, youth, young adults, and adults. And again, I'm going to say thank you so much, Wendy Gladney, Coach Wendy. Reach her at www.wendygladney.com, and her company is Forgiving for Living. Sandra says, what an amazing presentation. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing. Travis puts up several hand claps. And for books, go to wendygladney.com. And Arnetta, powerful presentation. We love you, Wendy, from Travis. And to all of you, we love you. We respect you. If we can support you, if you have any questions, please contact us at info@prc123.org. That's info@prc123.org. We will either connect you with a resource if you need it, if you need a coach, if you need some mental health, if you need just any kind of workshop, any kind of program. If you need somebody just to talk to, let us know. And Wendy, thank you so much. Before you get off this line, are you okay?
I'm good.
Okay.
And thank you for asking, but I'm good.
Absolutely. Check in with your people. Check in and ask them how they're doing. Because no matter how they're showing up, we all need some support. And I thank you all so much. Wendy, thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye, family.
Bye. What?